Welcome to our second webinar of this evening, writing about highly personal topics. I'm Julie Johnson Archer. I'm the director of the Writing Center. I'm joined by the assistant director, Emmy Amirati, who will be co-hosting tonight's webinar. And we've also got our doctoral writing specialist here, Dr. Basil Considine. So between the three of us, we should be able to answer any questions you have, or at least point you to some good resources. So again, feel free to ask questions throughout by using the chat feature here in Zoom. So we're going to just jump into the learning objectives for this evening. And it's important for us to acknowledge a few things as we dig into today's learning objectives. There are a few topics considered more intimate than sexuality. As a result, being asked to reflect on one's personal sexuality and sexual development can leave many writers and students unsure with how to begin, reasonably so. So that's why we're going to start with some important considerations about writing on this particular subject as an ACU student, and some strategies for how do you get started. Then we're going to take an example assignment from FAMO 356, which is a course all about sexuality and intimacy. So if you happen to be in this course, you're going to get a concrete example of how to get started on that particular week 4 assignment that's coming up. However, if you're not in that course, the example assignment and the information in this webinar will be useful for all sorts of assignments, as there are a number of assignments that touch on very personal topics like sexuality and other aspects of identity, for that matter, in many ACU courses. So for our first objective, let's talk about writing about sexuality. This subject can be the source of some anxiety or nervousness, and for some good reasons. For instance, if you're unsure what the risks may be in a given situation, who will read this? What will they do with my personal information? Being vulnerable in that unknown context can be unsafe. If you don't know if those who are in a position of power over you might disagree or judge you, honesty goes out the window. That doesn't feel good or safe. So first, I want to recognize the emotional freight of the task. If it feels daunting, you're not alone. But second, I want to remind you that in really all academic contexts, you get to determine the boundaries around what you are comfortable sharing or not, even and especially in the context of your academic assignments. You can always share some, but not all of your experiences and still fulfill the assignment to get a good grade. In addition, in the context of your education at ACU, we can also assuage some of these worries and clarify some of the risks by looking at a few key policies. So the first policy to consider is ACU's academic integrity policy, which I've provided a link to all of these policies in the slides, and you can access the slides on our website after the webinar concludes within the next day or so. So this policy provides respect for individuals' privacy, and this is a general policy for all courses. So the classroom is considered a private context in which to consider and discuss ideas and issues. As a member of any class, students must respect the privacy of all other members of the class by not sharing any recording of class conversation without the express written consent of all people who are seen or heard in the recording. And in the online asynchronous context, a recording could be a screen capture, screenshot of other people's comments or discussions. That would be the equivalent, I would say, of what not to do without express written consent. So know that going into your course discussions and your assignments, your privacy is being respected. In the case of this family studies course, the course syllabus has another policy to be aware of, the Title IX policy. In it, the course instructors state the value of creating a safe space to share and learn together. However, if there are current instances of sexual harassment or violence, the course instructor, just like all ACU employees, are considered mandatory reporters. So this is also really put in place to value your safety and protection during your time at ACU. So keep that in mind as well. Lastly, you might be aware that ACU has a stance of its own on the topic of sexuality, and you can read ACU's full sexual stewardship policy at this link on the slide. But this policy, while stating ACU's institutional position, also states the importance of students' academic freedom. This means as a student, you can and are encouraged to think critically, entertain different perspectives, and learn about the topic of sexuality, even those perspectives that disagree with ACU's stance. And all of that is expected and acceptable because we are an institution of higher education. So I point out all of these policies to help clarify the context. I mentioned in the previous slide, if you're unsure about the risks, you don't know what you're stepping into, then the vulnerability and honesty required of sharing and writing about such personal topics is really reasonably daunting. So knowing these policies are in place should help clarify and hopefully assuage any worries you might be feeling. Oops. A few final considerations, just thinking broadly about writing about highly personal topics. I want to share a few more considerations to keep in mind when writing on these topics, whether about sexuality or other deeply personal experiences and beliefs you might hold. One of my close mentors, Dr. Michael Harbour, says, "Words make worlds." By this, he means that the words and language we use really matter. They have an impact on our lives, on the world around us. They have the power to shape your experiences and communicate them to others meaningfully. This idea is really central to the Writing Center's mission here at ACU. The Writing Center tutors here value and honor your words and ideas. So whether your topic is deeply personal or not, I hope that you will know when you submit your writing to Writing Center tutors here at ACU, we hold your voice and your writing with deep respect. You might be thinking, why should I even write about my sexuality? You might be pushing back on this assignment or assignments like it. When you're asked to write about something you're not used to sharing very publicly, there's validity in questioning the purpose of the exercise. So one consideration is that writing and reflecting on your personal experiences, especially within the context of academic course materials, can be a powerful tool for advocacy, for personal growth, and even for connection with others. Another thing my mentor says is we don't learn from experience. We learn from reflection on experience. So what do the experiences and beliefs we hold mean in the context of a faith community? In the context of an academic field like family studies or marriage and family therapy, vocational formation, or whatever your degree path is? This exercise of writing about personal topics can be a useful one to practice connecting to your most personal beliefs or connecting your most personal beliefs to a larger context. That skill can be applied in many settings and be highly rewarding if taken seriously. So, one of the last things I'll say here, reflecting on the influences that shape you and experiences you've had is a challenging opportunity that not everyone is willing to take. And people have different reasons for that. But this introspection is a valuable part of higher education, one that ACU really does value, because ACU sees you as a whole person and your experiences that you're bringing to your academic coursework really matter. So that's where we'll end our considerations and move into more about the how, the logistics. How should we begin writing about highly personal topics? So here are a few, or two to be specific, two tips for writing about sexuality. The first is to keep it personal. So in APA, which is the writing style for most ACU courses, use personal pronouns when you're writing about your own experiences. In my experience, what happened to me, I believe. Those personal pronouns are perfectly acceptable and actually encouraged for writing about really personal, reflective things. The personal is political. However, for a personal reflection paper, consider focusing on your own life and experiences in order to dig deep and think critically and get a lot out of this practice. Avoid sweeping generalizations or assumptions about others or groups of people who are different from you. And I know you know this, but it's a good thing to keep in mind when writing about something so personal. Different aspects of identity include sexuality, gender, religion, and more. So when things are really personal, it can feel like the stakes are really high and you want to make a sweeping generalization about anyone who disagrees with your standpoint. But I would encourage you to avoid that in order to get the most out of this critical exercise. Some general strategies for how to begin writing about personal topics follow other writing process strategies you might already use or be familiar with, including brainstorming, reflecting, and analyzing. So for the brainstorming stage, you might start with a few select data points. If you're like me, you might actually write down a bunch of related data points, everything you might have experienced, everything under the sun. Jot them down in a full-on list and then circle or highlight just a few to start with. An experience that shaped you, a personal relationship that stands out as having a really big impact on your life, a moment of joy or pain. Those are often a great place to begin, rather than trying to summarize your whole life story or everything that's ever happened to you, which is likely outside of the scope of your assignment and might be good for a therapy session or a journal, a session with your journal, but not for the academic paper you're writing. You might reflect after you've gotten one or two data points. Reflect, how do these experiences connect or diverge from your values or beliefs? And then similarly, analyzing involves connecting your experiences and beliefs to your course readings and the videos you're watching. So all of these steps are just pretty general strategies, but let's take a look at the example assignment and then get into a bit more of the specifics. Emmy will take us into the specifics. So again, this is the example assignment from Family Studies 356, the week 4 assignment 1, titled Life Cycle Reflective Essay. And again, if you're in this class, the due date is coming up on May 28th, I believe. So this is an appropriate time to be thinking ahead. Again, if you're not in this course, I hope you'll stick around because the process we're going to go over for how to get started on this assignment is applicable to most any course assignment. So the purpose of this assignment is interesting. It says it's meant to give you an opportunity to reflect on your own life cycle development, where you have come from and where you are now. We are shaped by our experiences in each stage, and this is a chance to explore that for yourself, as well as understand what it means to be at your current life stage. This assignment is personal, and with that, the instructor will hold what you share confidentially and respectfully. So they're reiterating the fact that your privacy matters. The assignment instructions Lay out what's expected. Write a reflective essay, at least 500 words, which, when double spaced, is 2 to 3 pages, about your own sexual development across each life cycle stage up through your current life cycle stage. Briefly describe each stage and then reflect upon your experience of each one. This is obviously a very personal assignment, and you are not asked to share beyond what you are comfortable sharing. Reflect on your growing awareness as a child, experiences you had, and messages you received regarding your growing awareness and development. Identify your current life cycle stage and how that relates to your own sexuality. So all this is taken from Canvas. As you know, each assignment is followed by an assignment rubric, which is really helpful to know exactly how you're going to be graded and scored on each section. And yes, Basil, if you wouldn't mind, would you read over each of these criteria for me
Sure.
on this site?
So I like to start at the bottom because this is an area where students often, in a rush to get the assignment in or just to feel done with it, miss that 10% of the grade. The difference between an A and a B and a B or the C is the essay being formatted consistent with APA requirements and being of appropriate length, i.e. 500 words, 2 to 3 pages. But if we look at the content, we see that we have the thoughtful engagement with the course material. You're discussing things and not just giving a surface, well, I think this is great or this is sucks, but really talking about why or how this is or isn't meaningful to you. That's 30 points, 30% of the total. Following the specific prompts and answering those questions, that's another 30% of the grade. And then relating and citing the course material from this week and connecting that with your personal understanding of sexuality, that's another 30 points. You were talking earlier about reading the rubric. I think that's a great thing to do before you do the course reading for the week, because if you know, oh, those things I'm going to be reading, I will be making connections. I need to be making connections to my assignment. That lets you take notes. It lets you highlight. Lets you think, huh, how does this manage to move or not move me personally? And then when you arrive back to start writing and outlining this, you already have a list of things that you can draw on.
Great. Yeah, thank you for reading that, and really good things to keep in mind. So now I'm going to pass things to Emmy, our assistant director, to walk us through some of the logistics.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Julie, for helping us get started by considering how to approach this from a standpoint of, mental preparedness and reflection. For the next part of the webinar, we're going to look at more formal considerations for your writing, including, as Basil mentioned, our APA formatting and appropriate language choices for writing in APA. Right now, we're going to consider how we can use the prompt as a springboard to organize and develop the draft. So often the best way to organize a draft is to first consider the assignment questions. Here we copied the 3 big ideas from the assignment, which ask you to briefly describe and reflect on each life cycle stage, reflect on your growing awareness, experiences, and messages received at each stage, and relate your current life cycle stage to your sexuality. Because the assignment asks you to describe and reflect on each stage, one way that you can organize this draft is to sequence it in sections according to life cycle stage, up to the one where you've reached. Obviously, if you haven't experienced a stage yet, you can't really reflect on it from a personal perspective. So this means you'll start with a section on childhood, then one on adolescence, and then one on adulthood. If your current stage is young or middle adulthood, you'll stop with that section. But if your current life cycle stage is aging adulthood or older adulthood, you'll develop a 4th body section. If you choose to organize by life stage, then the name of each stage can become an APA Level 1 heading to set off the section. Level 1 headings are bold, centered, and written in regular title case. all major words capitalized, which we've modeled at the bottom of this slide. So now that we've planned a way to organize, let's consider how the questions can guide content development. Since the target length for your paper is set at 2 to 3 pages, if you try to aim for about half a page of text for each stage, that would be optimal, with a brief introductory and concluding paragraph and a discussion of 3 to 4 life stages. That half page per stage will help you hit the length requirement. So first, beneath each heading, like here we have childhood, you can start by briefly describing the stage. So we've written childhood is the stage of sexual development when, and you fill in the blank. Next, you can reflect on your experience during the stage as outlined in the first 2 bullet points. So during this stage, I became aware of, I experienced, the messages I received from others included. The language modeled in the green box shows how you can rewrite the questions from the prompt into sentence stems that guide your content development. So for instance, we rewrote the question, describe your growing awareness, as the sentence starter of, during this period, I became aware of. You can also see that in the example, we've modeled how to interact with resources. For instance, we could cite the textbook to show where we found details that describe the life cycle stage. Or if I were discussing messages received during childhood, I could link them to information from the text regarding the significance or purpose of such messages. Interacting with the course material throughout all the paragraphs of this draft is especially important because 2 rubric criteria, as Basil went over, worth 60 assignment points require you to either thoughtfully engage with course material or relate cited material to your personal understanding. So interacting with the material is very important as we go. Now, when you get to your current life cycle stage, which for me would be adulthood, take care to include language that identifies it as your current stage and relates the stage to your sexuality. For instance, you could say, I'm currently in the life cycle stage of young adulthood and my sexuality is impacted by my recent marriage. Or I am currently in the life cycle stage of middle-aged adulthood and my sexuality is impacted by symptoms of perimenopause. This question also offers opportunity to interact with resources because you can address how other authors link the realities of that stage to sexual understanding and experience. And Basil is asking a question. No, it's not about you, Basil. Wink, wink. So as you set up your draft, I do encourage you to use our brand new ACU APA undergraduate paper template, which has all the settings for APA format already set up. I am going to borrow the screen share from Julie for a minute to switch to an example to show you. Can you guys see my screen share?
Yep.
Excellent, thank you. So as you can see, this is our title page. We have this page number in the upper right-hand corner, even on the title page. We have 1-inch margins all around. On the title page, we have our title, Life Cycle Reflected Essay. We have an extra double space. Then we have the student's name, the affiliation or the program that you're writing for, and ACU. We have the name of the class. We have the name of the instructor, Brandy Chalmers, and we have the due date. So on page 2, that's where we start writing. And before the introductory paragraph at the top, you're going to repeat the title. So we've got Life Cycle Reflective Essay again. We don't need to put a separate heading for introduction because the audience knows this is your introduction. So labeling it introduction would be redundant. In the introduction, of course, we preview the draft. So you might want to address points like that your essay will focus on life cycle development. What phases of your life cycle will you address? And through what lens will you consider them? In other words, you'll be considering your understanding of sexuality during these phases. Next, in the next part of the page, you can see that we've got those headings that we talked about a little while ago. Childhood, adolescence, and I went up to my phase of adulthood here. So they're centered in bold and title case. If we had aging adulthood or older adulthood at the bottom, both those letters would be capitalized. This is the same way we presented them on the slides a few minutes ago. And beneath each heading, I pasted some sample text, which again is what we modeled on the slides a little while ago. You can actually start setting your draft up like this with the major headings and either the assignment questions or the sentence stems that you write from those questions before you even finish all of your reading or start all your reading. It's just a good way to set up the document so you can then go back and start filling in. At the bottom, after our body sections, I do have a separate heading for conclusion. And as you review your main points and consider the significance, you might want to answer questions like, what phases of your life cycle have you considered? How does considering where you have come from and where you are now help you better understand your sexuality and perhaps even that of others? Why was it useful to do this reflection? On a separate page at the end, still with our page number, we have the references page. For your references, you put the heading references with a capital R. The references are listed alphabetically. So your TED Conferences talk by Fleischman, if you choose to cite that, would be first. And then the textbook with Hyde and Delameter would be second. And we're going to talk more about how to set up the references and do citations in a few minutes. And right now, Julie's going to switch us back to our PowerPoint so we can continue talking about APA formatting. Thank you. Regarding APA, we're going to discuss guidelines for describing individuals with respect to age, gender, and sexual orientation, because all of these points are relevant to the assignment. And we'll also discuss how to cite and reference the module resources. So Julie mentioned earlier that when we refer to others, we should avoid applying sweeping generalizations or making assumptions, especially about individuals or groups who are different from us. In fact, APA guidelines require that we employ specific language when we discuss characteristics like age, gender, and sexual orientation, so that we avoid labels and acknowledge people's humanity. We're going to offer a brief overview of related guidelines here, but you can check out sections 5.1, 5.2, 5.5, and 5.8 of the APA 7th edition publication manual for full explanations. So one important point emphasized in that first section, section 5.1 of the publication manual, is that writers should avoid using adjectives as nouns to label people. When we turn an adjective into a noun, it results in othering. So instead of saying the gays or the straights, we should use language like gay men or straight individuals, instead of referring to the old or the elderly, which makes them seem kind of weak and decrepit. We could use language like older adults or aging adults as modeled in your assignment. Because this assignment requires you to write about yourself and perhaps other people at progressive life stages, let's talk about how to refer to characteristics of age. So to discuss children 12 and younger, APA suggests that we use terms like child, girl, boy, and children. Adolescents are considered 13 to 17 years of age, and you can use terms like adolescent, young person, youth, young woman, male adolescents, female adolescents, and gender fluid youth. Adults are 18 and older. Use terms like adult, woman, man, young adults, and middle-aged adults. And for older adults who are 65 years and older, you can use terms like older adults, older women, older individuals, and persons 65 years and older. APA also outlines specific ways that writers should use the words man, woman, male, and female. We can use man and men and woman and women as nouns to refer to adult men and women. So we could say an unmarried woman. We should use male and female as adjectives. So we could say male adolescents. The exception to this, or the difference, is that you can use males and females in the plural to refer to groups of individuals with a broad age range. So males can refer to a group that consists of both boys and men. And here's an example. Across their life stages, males and females in the family received consistent messaging regarding traditional gender roles and sexual assertiveness. Our slide with examples of how to refer to age gave us a little preview of APA guidelines for how to refer to gender, because we introduced adjectives there like male, female, and gender fluid. On this slide, we're going to dive in deeper. APA defines gender as a social construct or social identity based on the feelings, attitudes, and behaviors a given culture associates with a person's biological sex. And gender identity is a person's psychological sense of their identity. To that end, APA says to use man or men to refer to people who identify as male, and to use woman or women to refer to people who identify as female. So if a person were born male, but identifies as female, an APA-aligned description for her would be transgender woman. APA style also acknowledges gender diversity or gender variance. Cisgender refers to a person whose gender identity aligns with their sex assigned at birth. So when writing in APA format, I could describe myself as a cisgender woman. But individuals can also identify as transgender, gender nonconforming, genderqueer, agender, or gender fluid. Because APA style recognizes this gender variance, when we write in APA format, we must avoid terms that imply binaries. That means we should replace the opposite sex with wording like another sex or another gender. And we should replace opposite sex couples with language like mixed sex couples, mixed gender couples, same-sex couples, or same gender couples. In this writing assignment, obviously, you may also choose to reflect on sexual orientation. So let's review the APA guidelines for referring to sexual orientation. The APA definition of sexual orientation is a person's sexual or emotional attraction to another person and the behaviors and social affiliations that may result. APA guidelines indicate that writers should refer to sexual orientation and not use terms like sexual preference or sexual identity. Writers can use the adjective straight or heterosexual to refer to people attracted to those of another gender, for instance, heterosexual adults. And instead of using the terms homosexual or homosexuality to refer to people attracted to those of the same sex or gender, we should use specific identity first terms. Some examples of that are queer people, gay men, lesbians, bisexual individuals, or asexual persons. Finally, when we refer to multiple sexual and/or gender minority groups, we can use the term sexual and gender minorities, or we can refer to sexual orientation and gender diversity. So before we wrap up our discussion of APA, let's review how to cite and reference your materials for the week. First of all, if you want to cite your textbook, you'll follow the format for a whole authored book, which we've modeled here using a different book. A whole authored book just means that one author or one group of authors wrote the entire book themselves. The chapters aren't written by different groups of people. To write the reference for a whole authored book, first we put the author's last name and their first initials. So here we have Willis, J. If you have two authors, you could put Willis, J, comma, ampersand symbol, and then the next name, Jones, K, period. Next, you put the year of publication in parentheses. The title of the book goes in italics and sentence case. Sentence case means that we capitalize only the first words of the title and subtitle and any proper nouns. So here we have a title, the A is capitalized, and we have a subtitle, so the T in the is capitalized. We don't have any proper nouns, so none of the other words are capitalized. It's like if the title and subtitle were sentences, how would you capitalize it as a sentence? And last, after the title, you need to put the publisher. So here we have Yale University Press. Once you've written the reference, you know how to cite in text because APA follows the format we call author date citation. For a paraphrase, you can name the author and the year in parentheses, separated by a comma, at the end of the sentence to contain the borrowed idea. Or you could name the author in your sentence and follow their name immediately with the year in parentheses, which we've done here, Willis parentheses 2016. Instead of paraphrasing here, we actually have a direct quote. So if you directly quote the text, you need to include locator information to help the reader find the quote in its original context. For a book, the locator information is usually a page number. So you could put page 182 after the quote in parentheses. APA also has a guideline that says if you're citing a specific chapter from a book, you can name the chapter with the page number. For your assignment this week, or for this week for the assignment that you have, you've been assigned certain chapters of the book. So if you want to designate what chapter the detail came out of, you can certainly do that. So you could put something like Willis, parentheses 2016, described as the certainty of uncertainty. And then in parentheses after the quote, you could put the chapter number, chapter 10, comma, and then P period 182. In the course resources for the module, you also have a TED Talk video that you may want to cite. The TED Talk is published on the TED Conference's website, and APA provides very specific guidelines on how to cite videos from that website. So we've modeled this formatting. Again, it's a different TED Talk than the one you have, but it's the same format. To write the reference, first you put the name of the speaker. You put their last name, a comma, and then their first initial. Shostak, comma, S, period. Then you put as much date information as you have available. Usually on the TED Conferences site, they provide the month and the year. So you would put the year, comma, and then the month, 2012, comma, April. Next, write the title of the video in sentence case. That again means that the first word, the first word of the title and subtitle and proper nouns are capitalized. Basil. Then you put the word video with a capital V in square brackets. Then you list TED Conferences as the publisher and you would add the URL. To cite a paraphrase of information from the video, you can use the speaker's last name and the year, as in this example, Shostak 2012. You could also put their name in parentheses at the end of a borrowed idea, parentheses, Shostak, comma, 2012, close the parentheses. If you wanted to directly quote the speaker, you could add locator information. In this case, it would be in the form of a timestamp, identifying the second when the quote in the video begins. Timestamp is just like 1 minute, 36 seconds would be 1:36. So now I'm going to turn this back over to Julie to wrap up our discussion.
Thanks so much, Emmy. You've provided so much APA material for us to digest, and I'm glad you included the different sections where if you didn't memorize it in the last 20 minutes, you're not alone. I would have the APA manual open if I were writing about these topics, and APA's website also has a lot of helpful examples, and some of these rules are outlined on their website as well. And since we're talking about this, I wanted to note, maybe you're not writing about sexual orientation or gender, maybe you're writing about race or ethnicity, religion, all of these different aspects of very personal parts of ourselves. APA has a lot of really helpful guidelines about how to write to avoid bias, and we all have bias just because we're all human. So I think these are really helpful to know about, and if you are, writing about it for a course, great, start practicing, because then when you start writing for your employment or a publication, these guidelines will really help you be successful. We did cover a lot, so if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat room. I think we're going to have some time here at the end after we end the recording. If you would like to unmute and ask questions after the recording ends. But if you are working on this assignment or another assignment, there's still time to make Writing Center appointments as soon as this evening. In the Writing Center schedule, you can make asynchronous appointments, meaning you'll upload your paper and you'll receive feedback within 24 hours of the appointment, all via email. So that typically works for everyone's schedule. But if you'd like to have a live conversation, we also offer Zoom appointments. So look for those in our schedule. I think those are really great. If you're sort of at the brainstorming stage, you're not sure what to do to get started, or if you have a topic that's highly personal and you would really like to ask some questions in the privacy of a Zoom room with a tutor and talk through it, great. Those are opportunities for you. In case you're new to the Writing Center, we do have a two-step process for making a Writing Center appointment. So I just want to highlight that briefly. The first is to schedule the appointment in WC Online. And you can do this up to 2 weeks in advance. And you can also schedule up to 2 appointments per week. So you can sort of plan ahead if you know you've got some writing assignments coming up that you'd like to get feedback on. Then the second step, anytime before the appointment time comes up, go back into that appointment form and you'll upload your paper or whatever you're working on directly to the appointment form. So if you are watching this live, we've got a number of upcoming webinars still available to sign up for, to attend live in the summer 1 term. So similar to how we had a course tie-in tonight to the Family Studies course assignment, we've got another upcoming webinar on presenting on leadership theories that directly ties to a Communications 645 course assignment. So if that interests you, perhaps you're not taking that course, but you're an EDD student who's also writing about leadership theories, or maybe in another course context, that would be helpful to you. And then if you saw on our schedule right before this webinar, we had a live edit dissertation webinar/workshop. We've got a similar one coming up for capstone, dissertation, doctoral project formatting. So if you've got those questions, I know MFT students have their capstone assignment. If you're interested in getting some help with APA formatting, come to that session and you can actually submit your draft and get some feedback during that session. If you are interested in dropping in, you don't really have a Writing Center appointment coming up, but you'd like to just drop in and ask some quick questions, stay around a while and hear what other questions people are asking, we've got a drop-in session on Sunday the 26th from 5 to 7. And again, that really is drop-in, so you can come and go as you need and more. So check out our Writing Center website for all of the upcoming webinars that we've got. We already provided the link to our new undergraduate paper template. That is just a simplified version of our regular APA course paper template. So you can download that and other templates, including a capstone, EDD dissertation, DNP project template, all of those things. We've got a YouTube channel and many of our resources. In fact, all of our resources are available on our blog. If you have a question, feel free to email the whole Writing Center team at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. We hope you'll schedule an appointment. That's why we're here. And visit the Writing Center website for all of our resources. At this point, I'm going to stop the recording, and if you've got any final questions, we still have time to unmute. Hope you have a good evening.